So guys, welcome to this video, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you exactly how to start a clothing brand in 2025. If you don't know me, my name is Chris Bamber and I started a menswear fashion brand called Sans Pareil, and we took that brand from zero to over $5 million in sales. So in this video I'm going to peel back the curtain and show you exactly how I would start a clothing brand in 2025, because let's face it, times have changed and your strategy needs to change with it also. What worked 3 to 5 years ago is just not going to cut it anymore. In order to give you actionable and specific advice, we need to actually assess what your circumstances are. Now, we're going to break this down into 3 sections, and so we can give you exactly actionable steps throughout this, because let's face it, if you have a smaller budget, you're not going to be able to do certain things such as order a bulk load of stock, and it's just not going to be feasible for you. So we need to look at alternate routes if this is the route you want to go down. So let's actually take a look at the first stage, which is a budget of actually 2 to 5k. Now, this is a pretty reasonable budget, which a lot of people actually start off with. So let's actually look and break down how we can actually approach this to start our clothing brand. So if you have 2 to 5k and no prior experience in e-commerce, fashion, anything like that, it's not a problem. I had 0 experience myself when I first started, but it's going to make things a whole lot more difficult, because when you actually come to start, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up on certain orders, and although we try and do everything possible not to do this, it's just going to happen at some point. So we don't have much buffer to actually play with, and when we actually factor in the shipping costs, the customs duty, all this other stuff that comes into play, that's going to eat away at your budget. And we're going to only actually have maybe 1 to 2 styles that we can come out with if we're going to go and order from a factory in China. And the minimum order quantities are usually around 100 pieces per style, per color. So it's going to take up a considerable amount of that budget. So it leaves us with nothing left to play with. And this is bad advice if I just go and tell you to go and buy some stock like that. All your budget is going to be taken through the stock order, and you're going to be left with nothing to actually market your brand. We don't want to go in and literally spend every penny on stock and figure out that we don't have any budget left to play with. So we have to bear this in mind when we take the first step. So there are other ways in actually doing this. Could we raise money? Yes, that is a good viable option. But if you don't have any prior experience in e-commerce or fashion, then it's not a route that you want to take, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And when you actually take investment or you borrow money, it's going to leave you down a path that you don't want to go down, because if you make some mistakes, fair enough, with your own money, you can maybe restart again, all that sort of stuff. But when you take on any third-party debt, or if you take on investment, it's not going to look good in the eyes of the person investing or anything like that. Whereas if you had some experience, it would be a different ball game, because for myself, for example, if I were going to start a new brand tomorrow, I have 6-7 years of experience in e-commerce. I also have that in fashion as well. So I'm not going to make the same mistakes I did when I first started out. So this ties into what actual options we have left when it comes to actually our budget of 2 to 5k. So we have another option called blank suppliers. Now, blank suppliers are basically factories which produce garments which are not sort of customized to your order or anything like that. They're just basically blank templates, and they literally have no MOQ. So there's no sort of MOQ barrier when it comes to actually ordering, and it allows you to actually get your foot in the door without actually purchasing hundreds of items and basically taking all your money on stock. Now, some blank suppliers actually allow you to customize certain elements, such as the neck tag. Maybe they do embroidery or anything like that, screen printing, all that sort of stuff. And this comes on to extra fees, but to essentially get your foot in the door and to order literally maybe 5-10 pieces to test it out. It's a great way in order to get started, to get that momentum rolling, in order to actually progress onto the next stage. And if you can actually sell those pieces, yes, you won't have a naturally great margin as you would with if you were purchasing from a manufacturer and you're making them custom to order, OEM style, then it's not going to be the same, but it allows you to actually get the foot in the door, get the momentum rolling and start actually selling. Bearing in mind, blank suppliers also have a lot of good points, but they also come with some drawbacks in which I'll actually run down in detail now. And one of the problems with blank suppliers is that everyone and anyone can purchase them. And the blank templates in which you can't fully customize, and the only sort of customization you can do is maybe put a logo on. So it restricts you from actually coming up with new ideas, coming up with the actual USPs of the brand, and we'll go on to this more later on, but you're basically selling items that everyone else can buy, and there's no unique selling point in which allows your brand to stand out from the rest of the other brands. And without this, it's going to be hard for you to actually sell these items unless you've actually got a pre-built audience and they are sort of really well engaged with your content or anything like that. Then it's going to be very hard for you to actually sell these without coming up with some sort of unique selling point for them. Now, yes, the quality can be great with these blank suppliers, and I've actually partnered with one myself, which we actually use. And I'll actually give you access to this later on the video, so make sure to stick around for that. But one of the good points of actually using a blank supplier is actually it will get your foot in the door. It will get you selling these items, it'll get you so that you can make your website, so that you can actually start looking at how we can actually market these. So yes, it won't give you the true USPs of actually manufacturing and custom making everything yourself, but it'll enable you to get that foot in the door in order to you to simply progress and work your way up into a situation where you're able to purchase bulk stock, you're able to get some orders in, you've maybe built up a small email list in which you can then retarget later on. So it is a great way to get you started. Now, one of the other ways is actually a way called print on demand. And this can be another good way in actually getting started because you can basically print on blank t-shirts, print on blank hoodies, and you can then enable your USP towards the sort of graphics that you make. This is where you can target different audiences depending on your graphics. And it's not just a case of like a blank t-shirt or a blank hoodie. But the only problem with print on demand is it tends to cater towards the merch side. And if you want to actually build a clothing brand, you don't want to be categorized in the merch category. And it's going to be hard for you to get out because the quality with print on demand suppliers is usually not the best. Although it can get your foot in the door, I think the best route for you to take will be through blank suppliers. Now, just because you have a small amount of money to start with, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. And it can actually be a good thing and it can actually benefit you later on down the road. So now that we actually have our options covered with the budget of 2 to 5K, let's actually go on to another budget of 5 to 10K. With a budget of 5 to 10K, you have a little bit more wiggle room. So it's going to enable you to go to suppliers in China, custom make small collections. Yes, you might only come out with 3 to 5 styles, but it's enough to actually get you started. So if you have this budget and you're looking to manufacture your clothing brand, where is the best place to actually get started? You may have heard of Turkey, Portugal, China, Pakistan, all these different places. But in my opinion, China is going to be one of the best places for you to get started. Now, manufacturers in China are the best all-rounders. They have the equipment, they have the technical capability, whereas some manufacturers in, say, Portugal just might not have the technical capabilities that they would do in China. So Portugal are very good for jerseys, sort of knitwear, all that sort of stuff. But if you're wanting to build a sort of all-round sort of collection and keep the costs low, your best option is going to be China. Now, a lot of people, when they start the clothing brand, they may want to target the sort of luxury market and they want to create the best items possible. Now, the quality, if you find a good manufacturer, in China, let's say, is going to be on par with actually Portugal. And people assume that just because it's made in Portugal, it's going to be 10 times better quality than if it was made in China. Now, if you're looking at Portugal to try and manufacture, because you want that premium feel and premium say to basically say it's been made in Portugal, you're going to want to factor in all the costs that come with it as well. It's a lot more expensive to manufacture in Portugal than it is in China. And if you're just getting started and you're wanting to sort of build a collection with multiple styles, it's going to be very hard for you to do so if you go and say manufacture in Portugal. It's going to eat up much more of your budget. It's going to leave you with a lot lower styles. Now, it's important to remember that everything costs more than you originally anticipate. So if you are factoring in your manufacturing costs and that's all you've done, then you're going to be shocked and surprised by some of the other costs, such as shipping, such as customs duties. All these other things add up, and they can add maybe 10, 20, maybe even 30% on top of your original budget. And a lot of people actually forget this when they first start out, and I was one of them when I first started out. I had a certain amount of budget for stock, and that's all I thought about. I didn't factor in any shipping costs, any customs duties, or anything like that. And that's when I actually got into trouble later on. So now that we've actually figured out we want to produce in China, where do we actually find these manufacturers? Now, you can find these manufacturers actually everywhere, and one of the places in which you can try and find them is Alibaba. Now, there's thousands of different manufacturers on there. Now, there are other ways of actually finding them, but I'm going to keep that towards our 2 7 figures members. However, if you're just starting out, Alibaba is going to be your best shot. So now that we've actually figured out where we actually want to manufacture our items and we know the platform to try and search them on, we want to understand how we can actually try and find these manufacturers, because it's not just a case of picking one out and going with them. It's going to take a lot of testing, sampling, which is going to eat away at your budget, because let's face it, samples aren't cheap, and when you're actually custom making stuff, you're getting it shipped over, you're going to need probably 1 to 2K if you're going to go and test multiple different factories and try and find the one for your brand, because not all factories are going to produce the same quality of items. You want to check the communications, what they're like, the quality of work, lead times also, and these all play into factor of how good of a manufacturer they can be. So when it comes to actually finding a factory, it is just a case of a numbers game, because you're essentially going out and testing loads of different factories to try and find the one that's going to be best catered for yourself. Now, when you actually come to trying to find manufacturers, communication is going to be one of the main things that you want to look out for. How responsive are they? How responsive are they responding to questions, queries? The one thing that you've got to remember as a new brand is that you're going to be at the bottom of the food chain. And what this means is basically that factories probably won't want to deal with people that are ordering very minimum quantities, because they're going to have clients that are purchasing thousands and thousands of units. And if you're just wanting to come in and basically order 100, maybe 200 units, they're going to put you to the back of the queue. And you want to just factor in this when it comes to actually sampling and making your items and trying to find these factories. You want to also come across like you want to do this long-term partnership with them, and there's going to be X amount of orders in the future to try and sort of whet their appetite. Because let's face it, if they're having clients ordering thousands and thousands of units and you're just a small fish, then they're going to be more inclined to cater most of the resources towards those bigger clients. So to bear this in mind, there are a few ways in which you can actually sort of whet their appetite, make sure that you are in it for the long run and that they'll actually grow with you as a brand. Finding manufacturers is not easy, and it's going to be one of the hardest tasks that you do when it comes to actually starting your brand. And it can take a lot of time, money, resources, and you can spend a lot of money and ultimately get nowhere, because you may found a good quality factory, but the lead times, the communication is terrible. I've heard about people literally waiting 6 months for samples. Like, you can't be doing that, especially when you're a small brand, you're starting out. Even if you're a big brand, you can't be waiting that long for samples. You've got to be having these samples in literally couple weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks at max. And speed is going to be one of your best friends here. So we want to look out for the communication and how well and responsive they are. Make sure to factor this in mind when it comes to actually finding your manufacturer. However, if you want to skip the hard part of finding these manufacturers, trying to search these platforms, spending loads of money on samples, shipping fees, only for it to be the factory that you ultimately don't want to work with because they have terrible communication, the quality is not on par with what you expect, then hit the link down in my bio. I've got exclusive factory contact network of actually the same ones that we use for Sans Pareil to help build that brand into $5 million worth of sales. Each factory that we give you has actually been vetted by myself. So we've spent hundreds of thousands of pounds with these factories, and we only give you the ones in which we actually directly use. And they're known for the communication, reliability, and quality of work. So if you want to skip the hard part and actually focus on building your brand, hit me up on Instagram, DM me, and I'll answer any questions that you have. So now that we've actually found our manufacturer, we know what budgets we can work with. So now is time to move on to the next stage and focus on actual brand positioning and how we can actually come up with our brand identity. So in order to do this, we need to understand how we're actually going to go about creating our first collection. Now, bearing in mind we only have a limited budget of 5 to 10k, and you would have noticed that I haven't done anything beyond that because the same sort of rules apply to anything over 10k. You can work with the manufacturers, you can work with blank suppliers, you can work with print on demand. All these options become open to you once you have more budgets. So these are just the minimums in which I would say you need to have in order to actually work with these different manufacturers, blank suppliers, all that sort of stuff. So now that we actually come on to our first collection, bearing in mind we have a limited budget of 5 to 10,000, we need to understand our brand positioning, our identity, and our USPs in a highly competitive and crowded market. So this is probably one of the most important parts of this video. And if you don't get this right, this is going to lead you down a road of trying to sell products that ultimately you can't sell because you haven't done this right. What I'm about to show you now in this video is what I have learned from my own experience, because I started my brand in 2017 and I did all these mistakes myself and I had to learn out the hard way. And if I had only got this right on the first time, then it would have saved me literally years of trial and error trying to get this right. So if you listen to any part of this video, this is the part to listen to. So one thing I want to cover is if you try and appeal to everyone, you will appear to no one. And what does this actually mean? So when you're just starting out, trying to appeal to every Tom, Dick, and Harry is just going to be a losing game for yourself. Now, you want to be as specific and as niche as possible when it comes to actually creating your clothing brand. This way, it's going to give you the best fighting chance of survival when it comes to actually gaining traction with your clothing brand. Because let's face it, clothing is probably one of the most saturated markets out there. And if you do what everyone else is going to be doing, then you're just going to fall back into the same place. Now, if I was to look at the market today in 2025, I'd look at what sub-niches are available in the clothing space. Now, when I say sub-niches, I mean that within clothing, you have subcategories within clothing. It's a massive market, clothing, and we also want to tie our identity to one of these subcategories in the market. So to do this, we want to actually analyze what sub-niches we can actually go into. There's thousands of different sub-niches that we could choose and actually tie our brand identity towards. So as we mentioned in the previous line, is if you try and appeal to everyone, you will appeal to no one. Bearing this in mind, it's going to be 10 times easier for you to start out and be very selective with what sub-niche you want to go in. And the more narrow and niche you can go, it's going to be easier for you to target and sell to these people when you bring out your clothing. So in order to do this, let me actually give you one example of how I'd actually frame this. So I'd look at the market and basically say, what has been trending recently? Are there any subcategories that have taken off? And one of these examples is actually paddle. Now, paddle has taken off over the past few years, and you would have seen it's been growing and growing and growing. There's courts popping up everywhere at your local centres. It's big in international countries, and it's such a trending sort of sport that more and more people are getting involved with. Now, this would be a great example to tie our brand identity towards. It's a trending niche that ultimately we could tie our clothing brand to. We could have it a specific paddle sort of clothing brand and cater towards that sort of audience. Now, the important thing to remember is that you don't actually have to stick in this category. It can be as simple as getting started in this category and then branching out later on down the road. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to sell in the beginning when you actually close these gaps and focus on how narrow you can get with your audience. Now, if you create a clothing brand such as in the paddle niche like we mentioned before, it's going to be a lot easier for you to sell to them. If you were going to create some generic clothing brand that literally doesn't appeal to no one, there's no passionate people about this subject, and you're just basically trying to sell a logo, it's just not going to work. People don't buy into this, and it's a mistake that I did when I first started. I started my brand and thinking that just because the logo was the USP, it was going to work and everyone would understand it was my brand, but that's just not how it works. You want to understand that if you're going to sell a clothing brand and you come out with some random name, there's no meaning towards it, there's no association, there's nothing. Why are people going to buy your clothing brand over the next one? So make sure to keep this in mind and do not make this mistake when you're first starting out. Now, it's different for graphics and how you're going to be unique towards your sort of designs and what sort of fabrics you're going to use, all this different stuff, but simply just creating a t-shirt, a hoodie, some cargos with a logo on, it's not going to stand out. It's not going to make you any different to other people in the market. So please do not make this mistake. So this brings me on to how we can actually create a unique brand identity. If we're going into the market, such as a crowded market, such as clothing, we want to make sure that we stand out above the rest of the competitors. Now, in order to do this, we need to actually understand how we can actually stand out. So one of the ways in which we can do this is actually through the designs or the product. Another way is actually the niche that we're in, such as we covered before with paddle. We could dive into specific niches and try and stand out within the market. The next one is actually how we market the brand. So how do we position ourselves? How do we market our brand towards the customers? And we're going to dive into ways in which we can actually do this later in the video. Now, one of the things I want to cover is that your logo doesn't count as your USP. No one cares about your logo until you've actually built that brand, built that presence, built the following later on. It's harsh, but it is true. And it simply doesn't mean anything to anyone until the actual brand presence is built later on. And you're not going to have this when you're first starting out. So bearing in mind, we actually covered our starting budgets before and how we'd actually approach the market depending on what sort of budget we're working with. So now that we know where to start with our brand, we want to actually factor in our first collection. We want to figure out exactly what we want to come out with and how we're going to position ourselves in the market. So let's actually take the budget of the 5 to 10K example. Now, bearing in mind this budget, we could actually probably get 3 to 5 styles. Obviously, it depends on what sort of items you're ordering. If you're ordering just t-shirts, you can factor in probably creating another coupled styles above that. But let's take, for an example, the 5 to 10K budget. Now, when actually creating our brand, we want to focus on hit pieces. Now, what do I actually mean by hit pieces? Hit pieces are basically items in your collection that are going to stand out and drive traffic to your website. It's going to make it easier to sell. It's going to make it easier to market your brand, easier to stand out in a crowded marketplace. For an example, if you just came out with a blank t-shirt with, say, a logo on it, it's not going to really stand out. There's nothing unique about it, and it's not going to drive traffic to your website. And this is where most people get stuck on. They bring out a small collection, they bring out maybe 3 to 4 t-shirts, they've got maybe some styles in mind. They want to start off in this place, but bearing in mind that every other brand is going to start the same way and everyone thinks about it the same way. But we actually need to reverse engineer how we're actually going to sell these items and think about how we're actually going to market them. If we were to come out with a few t-shirts and just expect them to sell with a logo or maybe a graphic, graphics are slightly different. We can sort of play with the USPs there, but if we were to come out with, let's say, a jacket and sort of like matching pants that were completely unique to the rest of the market, they were sort of like a hit piece in saying that the designs were different, the material or fabric was completely different, no one else had done anything like it on the market, it's going to stand a lot better chance of success and survival when it comes to actually marketing your product. If we create an item that simply just blends in with the rest of the market, you're going to increase your advertising costs, it's going to be very hard for you to sell, and your brand's not really going to go anywhere. Whereas if we came out with hit pieces, yes, it's going to cater to a smaller percentage of people, but when those people actually see it, it's going to drive people to those websites because of the actual overall design of it. It's nothing like they've ever seen before, and they can only go to your brand for that piece. No one else has done any pieces like it. By focusing on hit pieces for your brand, it's going to give you a much better chance of survival when it comes to actually starting your clothing brand. A lot of people go about this the wrong way, and myself included back in 2017 when I first started out with just a couple of t-shirts. Brought out 4 t-shirts, literally just a logo on a t-shirt. It was terrible. It was just a plain t-shirt, 4 different colors, and I really struggled to sell them. I still got those items in my warehouse today. And this is exactly what not to do. You don't want to go down the same route that I did, because then you can't pull any cash back out of your stock. And the last thing as you want as a clothing brand is to have dead stock and not being able to pull any cash out of your stock. And by doing this, you're just setting yourself up to fail. Like we mentioned before, if you cater to everyone, you're going to cater to no one. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the video. So as we mentioned before, you don't want to bring out a product that literally blends in with the rest of the market. You want to be very unique with it. You want to stand out, but there are also nuances to this. You don't want to bring out a product that's so unique that's going to maybe 100, 200 people might buy it. That it's going to be so unique, so different that not many people are going to want to buy it. So there are sort of nuances with this. Don't be too stand out, but also don't be afraid to dive into that subcategory. Create different pieces that are going to start only cater to a certain percentage of people. It's going to help you massively when starting out your brand, because 99% of people are going to do the same route as everyone else. They're going to bring out a couple of products, put a logo on, and just expect them to sell. They're going to run some ads, they're going to run organic traffic, and then they're like, hey, I can't make this brand work, no one's buying my items, and then they don't understand why that's happening. Now, the only reason I know this is because I've done this myself. Now, once the actual brand's built, you can then diversify, put logos on items, and once you've actually built that brand presence, then it actually stands for something. People are buying it in for the logo, for the name, what it means, what it stands for. Maybe you've driven it by a community. Maybe you've done it by like a founder-led brand. Then they're actually buying it for that brand. They want to buy that brand because they want to be a part of something, not just because it's just some random name. It's not going to do anything for you as you're starting out as a small brand. So, number one, niche down. Don't be afraid to go too niche, but also don't make it too unique that not many people would buy. Also, make sure to factor in your costs when it comes to actually creating these styles. Make sure you focus on your hit pieces, and make sure not to spend 100% of your budget. So maybe you're bringing out 3 to 5 pieces, you have that 5 to 10k budget in mind, but you also want to fill out the website. And you could actually do this by creating your 3 to 5 hit pieces and then actually go into a blank supplier and filling out the website. So in this case, we have our hit pieces to draw traffic in, but we also have our blank pieces to upsell boost our average order value, and create that full catalog look. There are other ways to actually do this, but I'm not going to dive into too specific details. So one of the things I want to cover is what not to do when actually starting your brand. And one of the big things that I actually often see is people coming out with brands and slapping big logos on products and expecting that to be the USP of the product. Now, you can get away with sort of prints and graphics that maybe make your brand stand out, but when it comes to actually just putting a logo on a graphic on a t-shirt and expecting that to sell, it's a big no-no when you are starting a clothing brand. Now, if you have a budget of over £10,000 or more, then you're going to have a lot more flexibility than if you were starting out with a lower budget. However, this is not necessarily the best thing. Now, if you have a bigger budget, you're going to be a lot more lenient on costs. You're going to be able to get faster shipping. You're going to be able to cover certain things that if you were on a tight budget, then you wouldn't actually go for these things. When you have a bigger budget, it's not necessarily a good thing, because when you're first starting out, if you don't have much experience, then you're going to overlook a lot of other costs. You're not going to be willing to negotiate because you'll just think, oh, I can pay that. I can get express shipping. I can get all these different things. And you're not going to be more willing to negotiate to improve your margins. And sometimes if you are working with a big budget, you can actually buy a lot more stock than you originally thought. Say for an example, the MOQ is 100 pieces. You might go in and just buy 200, 300, maybe 500 pieces because you expect the demand is going to be more than you originally think. You think it's going to be easier to sell than you originally thought. Now, unless you have a pre-built audience, it's going to be very hard for you to start off and build this brand unless you do certain things right and get it right from the start. So if you're working with a bigger budget, you're going to be more inclined to purchase more items within the collection. And this is a big no-no when you're first starting out because you haven't tested these styles. You don't know what styles work. And if you go in and maybe say that I think I can sell this product, I'm going to order a couple more 100 units because I think it might sell, it's the wrong way to actually approach this. Unless you actually have some data behind this in terms of email lists, signups, all this different stuff that we cover inside 27 Figures, then you're going to miss out on a lot of stuff. And it's going to hurt you when to actually come and start on your clothing brand because you're going in with styles that you think they might sell. And the last thing that you want is dead stock in your hands that you're going to have to discount later on. And with you being an actual new brand, you don't want to be using discounts. It's going to hurt your brand's perception. And if a new brand has just released a collection, 2 weeks later, it's then on sale, it's going to hurt your brand in the long run. So as promised early in the video, I'll give you my blank supplier. Make sure to actually click the link down below. All you have to do is enter in your email and I'll give you my blank supplier for free. Now, if you do use the link, you will get 5% off your order and I do get a tiny small commission. So it helps you, it helps myself. And if you don't use the link, you won't get that 5% off. But feel free to check that out. All you'd have to do is enter in your email and I'll give you the direct suppliers that I have used. So now that we've actually covered the supplier and manufacturing side, we want to actually dive into how we're going to actually approach the market. In order to stand out as a new brand in a crowded market space, we need to do something completely different. This can be simply through our products, like we mentioned before, with the design aspects and the hit pieces. And this can also be the positioning in which we go into the market. You may have seen the rise of founder-led and community-led brands, and this is the way consumers are more going towards. A lot of consumers want to feel more connected to the products they buy, and with the community aspect of this brand, they do great products, but they also have something else to offer. It's not just a case of a product is here and they get that and nothing else. They have certain community aspects. They have sort of founder-led brands where they actually tie into that lifestyle, that community in which they're offering, and they feel connected when they actually buy these products. So as we mentioned with the example before with Paddle, you can do this with literally any community, any niche. So how could we look at this? We could look at this in terms of events, clubs, say even like games with paddle, for example. Like, how could we get our community more involved in certain group chats, in certain events where we hold events weekly or monthly, where the community gets together, plays games of paddle, they wear the products as well, and it all ties into each other. And this way you're sort of fostering a great loyal community that is ultimately going to be die-hard fans of your brand. The brands that are killing it at the moment, not just in fashion, people are doing this in supplements, in all these different niches, and the brands that are killing it are actually creating these communities, because inherently humans are social sort of creatures, so we want to feel connected and part of something. And this is the way that actually brands can connect with the consumer and focus on how they can actually deliver value instead of just giving a product and there's no sort of meaning or connection towards it. Yes, there might be some sort of perception when you wear it. For an example, if it's a luxury brand, anything like that, but there is no sort of connection within this space with actually connecting consumers and making them feel a part of something. So if I was starting a brand today, I would really think about how I can incorporate this into the whole sort of marketing strategy. How can we acquire customers, but also get them to be die-hard fans of the brand, incorporating that community aspect, and how we can actually deliver value to them, not just in the way of products, but in the way of building this community, doing social events, all this type of stuff to get more touch points on our brand. And by actually doing this, you're not just selling a product, you're selling a feeling that other people want to get involved in, they don't want to miss out on, and they want to feel part of a community. So these are some examples in which you can take into your own brand and figure out how you can actually approach the market differently to the rest of other brands and how you can actually succeed in a saturated market such as clothing. It's a massive market and there's so many different players about. You need to stand out in order to be successful in it. So these are my exact takes of how I would approach a new brand, how I would start a new clothing brand if I were going to start one tomorrow. So I just want to say thank you for watching this video, and if you have any questions on the manufacturing contact list or you wanted to start your own brand, you enjoyed this piece of content and you find value in it, then be sure to hit the links in the description. I do offer one-to-one mentoring for people who want to start the brands and scale the brands also. We also have the manufacturing contacts and also the blank supplier contacts if you want that for free. The manufacturing contacts do come at a cost, but they will save you thousands in sample fees trying to find manufacturers. So if that is something you're struggling with, go ahead and click the link in the bio, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. So appreciate you watching the video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one.